Please join me in welcoming Carolyn Chase. She's the CEO of San Diego Earth Day. Since it's World Environment Day today, we thought it would be appropriate that we invited Carolyn so that we could learn a little bit more about how San Diego Earth Day started, its impact on the local community, and how we can get more involved. Carolyn has served as CEO of San Diego Earth Day, which is the nonprofit organizers of Earth Fair in Balboa Park, since 1993. She also served on the Planning Commission for the City of San Diego, is now a member of the Pacific Beach Planning Group.
Acting locally.
And the president of the Fiesta Island Dog Owners. So welcome.
Thank you.
So today is the United Nations World Environment Day. Since its beginning in 1974, it's been a day that the UN hopes to encourage awareness and action to protect our environment. Each World Environment Day is organized around a theme that is intended to draw attention to a particularly pressing environmental concern. And then each year also has a different host country. So this year the theme is air pollution, and China is the host country. So what does this mean for us locally, and how does San Diego observe a World Environment Day?
You know, internationally really is where World Environment Day is observed, but we have a local United Nations chapter that always has events, and it really is the same kind of approach as Earth Day and a lot of our annual festivals. I mean, throughout history, human beings like to have their annual festivals, and so World Environment Day is observed in many different countries and in different places in different ways in the United States. Here we have some lectures and things that you can go to.
Great. So one additional comment, we have a microphone in the audience, so feel free, if you have questions, we don't need to hold them till the end.
But I would say on the air pollution issue, the County of San Diego here is the same group as the Air Pollution Control District, which is not true in a lot of regions. And they did just vote to do a new analysis of how they're analyzing toxic air pollutants in the San Diego region. And they expect from the results of that study, they may make changes to the air pollution standards here locally and regionally. So there's always something going on in all these areas.
So we would love to learn more about the incredible impact that you've had with the Earth Fair. So why don't you tell us more about that, how it began, and kind of the impact locally as well?
Well, the Earth Fair is a fair. It's a festival. We have about 300 exhibitors, nonprofit groups, for-profit groups, and agencies. It's about 40% nonprofit groups, about 50% for-profit groups, and a little less than 10% government agencies. And every table there is supposed to have something that they're sharing to do about sustainability, about the environment, whether it's a product, a service, or they're recruiting volunteers because they're a nonprofit group. We have some slides. I think we should show those. And we also host the San Diego Earth Day Parade, which has usually marching bands. Oh, we'll see some pictures here. Children, many children, but adult groups too. You pick your message. This year's theme was Protect Our Climate, but Earth Day is universal. Something about these pictures are actually some of my favorites from 30 years of Earth Day. If you look on the left, who has a parade where somebody has a sign that says decomposition timelines? I ask you. I think that is totally cool. And you can't really see the signs, but each unit had an item, and then it said how many years it would take to decompose if you actually, put it out in the environment. Fight climate change, a lot of creative sign making. That's the San Diego 350 group, which is a big climate change group. And below, a whale of a sign. I just want to say, you can do fabulous things with cardboard. Marching bands, again, we put up art banners created by local artists in advance that the public can color. And this year we had 5 live artists painting 4-foot by 6-foot murals during the event. And the major feature of the Earth Fair is we put it on with about 300 volunteers every year. We stand in the space of, okay, who's going to do this with us? We do have many returning volunteers that we do team leaders and management. They're all enrolled, and job descriptions are online every year. We have about 30 returning area managers that focus on a specific part of Earth Day, and the event is divided into areas. And like I said, it's about 300 volunteers, and it's a little frightening every year to see if we can find them, but we always have. And then, of course, there's the exhibits themselves, which is really what Earth Fair is about. Everybody's there to share something. Zero Waste San Diego, we're one of the biggest festivals in the world that's tried to implement zero waste, which is now something that the city has adopted, a zero waste plan. If you're not in favor, how much waste are you in favor of? If you're not in favor of zero waste, are you in favor of more waste? That's an I Love a Clean San Diego display. They promote beach cleanups, and throughout the month of April, there are many different ways that you can volunteer to make a difference, and also just take a hike, learn about your local environment, learn how you can affect it by volunteering with the governments, agencies, or with private groups. Oh, that's at the end. We'll come back to that.
So I imagine it takes a village. You mentioned 300 volunteers to put on Earth Fair. So tell us a little bit about how you recruit your volunteers, how you mobilize them kind of leading up to the event day and then actually on the event day.
Well, Earth Day was big from the beginning, and it was organized from the outset as a coalition approach. The International Earth Day theme has pretty much always been think globally, act locally. And so we basically put up flyers. And this was before the internet. Now it's all online. Our website came up in about 1999, and since then we recruit online. All the job descriptions are online, the time slots, and we hold 2 volunteer trainings, or we do custom volunteer trainings if enough groups have enough for us to come out to their school or their workplace to train the volunteers. So it's really providing the context in which everybody else can do their work, either volunteering or sharing what they're doing.
That's great. When we were speaking earlier, you had mentioned one of the compelling things was the diversity of the volunteer groups. So tell a little bit about kind of their backgrounds, where they come from.
Every part of the county. And actually we have people that fly in to volunteer because I think it's such a great thing, which I'm hoping they're offsetting their carbon. Really, it's a networking phenomenon in a certain sense, because when we announce the date, all the groups, so you've got 300 groups, most of those groups, certainly nonprofit groups, have their own internal email list, so they announce it to their groups as they recruit their volunteers. So you certainly have a building approach. Throughout 30 years, we've always had media sponsors. We have television station sponsors, radio station sponsors. It used to be we'd have 8 or 10 radio stations. Now we've watched that industry consolidate. Now we're only down to 1 or 2. But we have Spanish language sponsors. We announce the parade in 3 locations in English and in Spanish. And really a lot of our volunteers come from Chula Vista, believe it or not, but really all over the county, and all ages too. I have a picture from last year of a 90-year-old volunteer with one of our youngest volunteers. So it really spans the gamut.
Yeah, that's great. So many people are always looking for ways to engage and to get involved and have impact in their communities, and oftentimes are paralyzed on where to start and how to even begin. So sort of what advice do you have for someone to kind of take action or to get started?
Well, that's what Earth Day is really all about. You know, a lot of groups will be volunteering the rest of the year. Earth Day is every year, but you have to get started somewhere. And I remember I saw a flyer for an Earth Day festival, and at the time I was looking to volunteer for an environmental group. I decided I care about nature, I care about animals, I care about all these things. Where do I go? There was no internet. This was like late 80s. And so you had to learn about it, basically word of mouth. You might see a flyer somewhere. And at one point I saw a flyer saying, oh, we're organizing for the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. And I thought back when I was in middle school, I think I'm about 12 or 13, in 1970 approximately, they had the first Earth Day. And at that point, I did a poster in school, and I thought, whatever happened to Earth Day? So I went to this meeting with not a lot of intention for my future, and ended up playing a major role in volunteering. But we formed a coalition. There was about a dozen different nonprofit groups at the time, and we had a lot of meetings. And then I would go to the meetings, and then the logistics people would be able to organize the events, so they didn't have to go to the meetings. Community organizing is an interesting process, I guess we'll call it. But the whole purpose of Earth Day is to get people started in a certain sense. We have a kids area, of course. We have the parade, which is all areas. But I have people, I remember a roommate from college telling me, I don't care about the environment, but I came to Earth Day because I know you, but now I'm recycling, Carolyn. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then 5 years later, I'm like, well, I'm trying vegetarianism now. So you really have to meet people where they're at. So if you're come to Earth Day and you're interested in finding something, you can find something.
A little bit of something for everybody, depending on what they're looking for.
Exactly. And the other thing about environmental activism, I would say, is that it can be awesomely overwhelming, given the global reach, climate change. How does an individual really make an impact? We live in politically charged times, but perhaps that's the time we need to make the bigger impact. So it's really meeting people where they're at and people choosing to be there as well. And there's also other things you talk about, removing barriers, why people don't take action, why they do. But in essence, Earth Day is really about, we need to build the world to live in. Environmentalism throughout the ages has had to stop or try and stop a lot of things. And that's important work. And several groups of the Earth Fair will work on stopping what they feel to be bad things. But Earth Day is very much, what is the future we need to live in? We need to build the spaces that we need to live in. In addition to protecting and saving some things, what's the future that we're going to live in? So at fairs throughout history, international ones, world's fairs, they've always sort of been based upon innovation or sharing, how can we come together and do something? And so we're just in that mode with a little bit of everything. We have some big companies there, some small companies. We have a lot of test marketing going on there. I remember a couple of years ago, they test marketed toilet paper with no paper tube. And you think to yourself, okay, it does make a difference. It reduces, that amount of paper. So, the little things, they add up. The cumulative impacts is part of the biggest problems we have with climate change, really.
So what have you seen over the last 3 decades that you've been involved? So what are the changes? I know you mentioned a couple of them, but when you think back to when it first started to the differences that you see now.
It's funny. When I first started, I have a vivid memory of having one of the first home copiers. It used to be nobody had a home copier, right? But we got one of these. And I remember I was making flyers. The National Group had provided flyers on like 10 different areas. And one of them was global warming and had a great picture of the Earth with a temperature thermometer in it. And I remember I'm making these copies of global warming, okay? And it really just focused on the chemistry. And the chemistry has been known for a very long time. In San Diego, we began measuring carbon emissions based on Scripps Institution of Oceanography back in the 50s. And so we have a lot of scientists here that have a lot of foundation in the chemistry of it. But in those days, it wasn't as certain. There is at UCSD has several Nobel laureates, of course, but one of them in atmospheric chemistry. In the day, I remember talking to him, and I said, well, can you help me go out and talk to people or tell them about the chemistry of this and why it's important? And he's like, well, I can't really do that yet. But later on, say 10 or 20 years later, he was writing testimonials and saying, yes, this is important. The science is known now. So we've had a lot of science has come to the fore, even though they knew the mechanisms at that time. I lived through the birth, death, and resurrection of the electric car. How many of us have electric cars? I had an EV1 until they actually towed it out of my driveway, and I marvel right now. I've had several electric cars at this point, but I marvel at that time. I ran around UCS, San Diego with a 30-mile range, folks. 30 miles. Never ran out of juice. That's knowing your geography and having places to plug in with friends. Now I've got Nissan Leaf has a 100-mile range, and we've had many, many electric car concourses at the Earth Fair. There's the Electric Vehicle Association of San Diego. It has hobbyists that do their own installs and changes. There's a hobbyist thing going on. There's also new car dealers, and that's a huge transformation in that industry. Solar power panels, we had solar power vendors in 1990, and they were really kind of glamour items where you needed them because you're out in Anza Borrego and you can't quite get on the grid you want. It's like 50 grand or 60 grand to get a system in those days, but we would always have solar power vendors. Recently, over the last 5 or 10 years, we went through this phase where there were a lot fewer because they're going mainstream advertising now. They're radio, television, all the different things. But then they're coming back to Earth Fair. But they have a different sales approach. And we've watched these industries merge. I mean, I could tell you the original solar power providers who were best in San Diego at the time who were purchased by this and purchased by that. And we've seen ones that go out of business. So we see a lot of that kinds of thing. Early in Earth Day, people introduced community-supported agriculture in this region. You may or may not know San Diego has the largest number of organic farms in the state of California. We've got the weather, of course, well, at least we have had the weather. We're getting more rain. That might be good for that. But I know a farmer who started his community sport agriculture where you can purchase and they'll bring you a weekly box, or every other week they'll give you a box. And that was brand new in those days. It didn't exist. And now all these different options exist where you can have fresh produce delivered to your door. Zero waste, I mentioned a little earlier, that is now an adopted concept. Even though we may never get to zero, it's certainly from an efficiency and design perspective, it's the place you want to stand when you're designing new things. You want to minimize any sort of power, waste, heat, anything out. Efficiency is the way to go. We see the standards have made California some of the most efficient in the world. California is generally leading the way in a lot of this stuff, and San Diego has more photovoltaic installed on their individual rooftops than pretty much most places, any other places in California. Although there's some places that have gone ahead in that. We have a combination of rooftop and centralized installation on a lot of industrial facilities here in parking lots. There's probably other things, water conservation, air pollution. There's so many issues. Habitat preservation, we've made some progress on that. The things we haven't made progress on would be zero waste in a lot of ways. It is way too difficult to recycle. It is way too difficult to recycle. And we have zero waste stations throughout the event, and we recruit volunteers to stand in front, and we have signs that says what you can and what you can't. And I noticed here in the Google station, they have signs of what you're doing, and we're right over there going, oh, but you can't send these, cornstarch silverware. You can't, that's not silverware, but cornstarch utensils. They don't go into the city system because it takes 25 years to degrade, and they need to degrade in 3 weeks. Are you sure those are being composted? So let's talk to your Google Recycling. But that's how you learn things. We're the first festival to start doing food composting on site, which is a challenge. And one of the things that happened this year was our composting got rejected at the site because it didn't have enough food in it. It had too much paper, because we're using paper plates, which you can make, but you have to have enough food, but we don't want food waste either. So you run into these problems with the practicalities.
Right.
And, of course, people just don't know what to recycle, and they don't know it has to be cleaned or it can't be exported. China, and we've been exporting a lot of this waste to Asia, and they're saying, no, we're not going to take your dirty trash anymore, nor should they. We have not made enough progress on closing the loop, especially on the producer side.
Probably a lot of it too, like you said, is educating the consumer what can be recycled and what can is the very first step.
Right, but we need to make it easier on the consumer, where they do in many other parts of the world. They have a much more integrated system than we do, whereas we put the burden more on the consumer. The things that the city here does best actually is the composting system, if you know how not to contaminate it with plastic or other things that can't be. But the city does a good job on the composting side.
That's good to hear. Do we have any questions or anything for Carolyn, the audience?
Coming down to San Diego or something like that, or is that probably not the right approach?
It probably is the right approach, but the issue of the city of San Diego, and Zero Waste is San Diego's this nonprofit that's promoting a change to this. The city has a very unique system in that they have their own landfill, which is actually quite a rare thing for a city to have. So they have some control, but for 30 years they've been telling me the landfill is going to be closed. So that's why they've had to focus on diversion, because at the same time they want to save the landfill capacity, they make money on every ton that goes in there. So there's an interesting dynamic. But the landfill, the fact that they own the landfill, turned into a different situation in the early 20th century, and they had a people's ordinance, is what it's called, in 1919 was passed, that made it illegal for the city to charge any individual single-family household for their own waste pickup. So unless they have an amendment to the city charter, which requires a public vote, they can't charge a per fee for that. Now, they could potentially charge a per fee for the recycling and not the trash, because the theory at the time in that day was that they shouldn't charge for the trash, because in that days it was almost all compostable and people would go by and pick it up and sell it because they had a place to deal with it and they didn't have plastic in it. But the concept behind the ordinance was, well, you should always recover this waste. You shouldn't charge us for this waste. So now we have that interesting system overlaid on this system. It's right from a market perspective to charge more for it, but we have that hurdle to overcome. They do charge for it in all the other cities. So if you live in another city, you have to pay EDCO a monthly fee to pick up your recycling, and they have a monthly fee for trash. So it was much easier to institute that outside the city of San Diego.
So how well does San Diego in general do recycling versus trash management in the sense, like in our apartment complex, there's like a trash bin in the back, but it's like same bin with the wall in between and two different lids. One side is recycling, the other side is trash, and then you see the huge trash truck come and dump it in. Is it actually being dumped and tracked separately, or you're just like wasting
I
time
would
trying
have
to
to know
recycle?
who is actually picking up. So the
So-
thing about the city is it's segregated between single-family households and apartments or businesses. Apartments and businesses have to pay for trash and recycling pickup, and what happens to it depends on who they're hiring to pick it up.
And the city doesn't try to enforce any.
They do. If you were to report that to environmental services and ask them about it, they might look into it.
Okay. So it's supposed to be like two different trucks coming and getting the recycling versus.
No,
Okay.
it could very well not be working out.
Okay, thanks.
You might want to look into that. You never know. I mean, it's always very interesting. Where does it go? There is really no such place as a way.
I was wondering, you mentioned about the compostables, right? Shouldn't there be three classification? Why we only have trash and recyclables? We should probably have trash,
Right.
compostables.
They are starting to do that in the city. The state has created certain regulations that are going to require them to do food composting, but they're starting, as makes sense, with restaurants. And so they've got a pilot program working right now to do collection from restaurants. It's much harder on the household level. The biggest problem with all recycling, frankly, is contamination, which in the case of food waste becomes vermin. And in the case of plastic, when it's unwashed, that becomes vermin. Mostly they would send these things of plastic that was segregated, but it wasn't clean. So when you open it in a container in China somewhere, you've got all sorts of vermin showing up, in insects and cockroaches and all kinds of things. So that's part of the reason they cracked down on that. So it's funny, I contacted the city this year. Every year we do a program guide for the event, which has articles of interest of what's going on in the environment. This year I contacted the city about doing an article about what's the status of the food composting system. And they didn't really answer me in time for the deadline. So I'm just thinking they might be having some startup issues. But they do have a composting thing, composting site at Miramar that you can visit if you want to get a tour out there. It's really quite great. And they pick up green waste from, I think, 2/3 of the city. So only 2/3 has green bins versus black bins and blue bins. And but the green waste is really supposed to be lumber and yard materials. It's not supposed to be food waste because that just causes these other problems. So we'll see. The state is pushing the diversion issue. So, I think we're ahead of most places. But there are a lot of problems because consumers don't know what to do. And you get into those issues, well, if I wash this little plastic container, is using this water really better than needing, to put this plastic in a landfill where it'll be safe for 1,000,000 years versus having it out in the environment where animals and people can have problems with it?
I have another question I'll ask from here. So you're talking about cleaning the recycled materials before they can be recycled.
Mm-hmm.
And the expectation, I guess, is on the person who's producing the waste to clean it and then put it in the recycled bin. But isn't that like very inefficient? I always wonder how much am I actually wasting trying to use soap and washing and all the energy usage then.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, I just assume, okay, maybe they'll have a bigger cleaning facility, just dump everything into a vat of soapy water and whatnot. So what's the plan on that? What's the city doing? Do you know anything?
There's no plan. Well, here's the thing. I'll say a couple things about that. If your pickup is being done by a company called Edco Recycling, who happens to also do recycling service for us, they did a very smart thing a few years ago. The owner invested in importing a recyclable separating contraption, let's call it that. It's really like going into Mario's world. It's really built, because I got to tour this place. So the dump trucks come in one side. They dump everything out on the main floor, which has got water pouring out to get the vapors down. And then everything gets loaded onto different conveyor belts, and they go up and they sort themselves literally through a series of machines that, you've got rollers that bounce things up and down, and they're with laser lights because they're trying to determine what material is this and where does it go. So they have this really fancy sorting mechanism up there. And the good news, and the reason I mention this, is because they have not had their loads rejected by China and where they're sending them, because their stuff is being cleaned to a higher standard. They actually bought this thing They're designed in Europe because they care much more about recycling in Europe, it turns out. Everything's labeled. They know how to sort it. The producers comply with making things easier to sort there, which is really what we need here. So if you're in an area served by that, you're good. EDCO Recycling. The problem is they're mostly North County. In the city of San Diego, they're having a crisis at the moment on this area. They just actually finished the contract with the people they had sorting the recyclables, and they had somebody else take it over. But it's turned into something that was putting millions into the city coffers into something that's about to cost them money. So the system is actually about to have a big financial crisis, and I don't honestly know how they're going to solve it because they don't know how they're going to solve it. So, but the composting situation is good. The pickup is good, but the sorting and keeping it clean, that needs big improvements. They're going to keep trying, I think.
My question was probably partially answered now. When you compare like San Diego to other places in U.S. and other countries, where is the like a cutting edge technology at, and where are we comparing to those technologies?
In applying it to what, environmental improvement or?
I'd like all the recycling.
In terms of recycling, as I just saying, it's kind of a mixed bag because culturally we haven't really embraced it in a functional way, I don't think. So I'm not sure. I mean, I picked that as the area that needs the biggest improvement. There are areas for other big improvements too, actually. Part of the reasons I volunteer on the land use planning group, planning commissioners thing is to try and learn about what's going on with growth and traffic and the whole design of the cities is fascinating to me. That's a whole other thing. We had the city planning department with his Earth Fair this year explaining how they're trying to do better growth and different people fighting against some of those things. So I would say we're ahead on a lot of things, especially energy efficiency and solar power kinds of things. But I don't think we're particularly ahead on the waste and recycling issues, except for, like I said, EDCO's got this latest state-of-the-art. But in terms of making it easier for people and businesses, making their products packaged better, we're just beginning to try and make progress on the single-use plastics front. That's really been rising, thank goodness. You can now buy, reusable straws. But here's funny. So I'm getting old. When we were growing up, they had paper straws that were reasonable. And then you couldn't find a paper straw 10 years ago. And just now, because they've banned the plastic ones, you can now get industrial grade paper straws that can be composted, and you can still have a milkshake out of them, and you won't, it doesn't have to be plastic for a lot of this stuff. We had solutions for single-use things that aren't plastic.
Thank you for joining today. Very interesting hearing you speak. One of the things I was thinking about in terms of one of the best ways to incentivize, maybe not best ways, but one of the ways to incentivize behavior is financial incentives, right? So we have programs out there like SoCal Water Smart, right? We have programs, solar incentives, we have EV credits, but it seems to me that there is a lot of disparate areas to gather that information from a consumer perspective. Are you aware of any efforts to, at least in the San Diego level, to consolidate the list of benefits for consumers to help drive change?
Oh, the quick answer would probably be no, but I think that's not true. There was a group that was doing an annual report card on sustainability that would gather the measures together, and it used what's called the Equinox Center. And I think that they've merged with somebody recently. I think, frankly, the biggest problem in San Diego is getting funding for groups that are working on the issues that aren't popular in some respects. I did a lot of work, and I actually founded another nonprofit group working on transportation design and transit design. And we actually designed a state-of-the-art transit system based on San Diego land uses. And we hired experts to apply global best principles to this. And we took it into the elected officials, and they just didn't care. And today, maybe this was like 10 years ago we did this plan, and today now they're trying to move to this. And I'm trying to say, well, look, here it is. But they don't have the education about how it should work. They don't think about the design standards. There's a lag between, what do they say, politicians are trailing indicators versus leading indicators. So I would like to see more support for some of the groups like Equinox and my group, because there wasn't any. Who's going to really fund improving transit performance? Who's really going to get excited about that? Really, in the United States, transit has been considered a welfare state program. It's for poor people who can't afford a car. So there's a lot of social, cultural issues in there, and you can't get poor people to contribute to a transit group, because they're busy. They're busy working and trying to get back and forth to work on a transit system where you can't get anywhere, a lot of places you can't get to. So that's a big picture issue where I'd like to see some innovation. And we finally did get some changes in the bureaucracy and the elected officials. So hopefully that will come along. But I'll have to check and see if Equinox has put out a report recently, because they used to do the indicators. Throughout the country, Earth Day has been associated with different groups that would do sustainable indicators. Some of them started in Seattle. There's some in St. Louis of different sustainability indicators. And there was a group that did develop these for San Diego.
I have a question around bringing us back to Earth Fair. So first of all, congratulations. It's such an amazing and large event, so I can't imagine all the work that goes in there. You mentioned 300 volunteers, but it's thousands of people attending, right? Would love to get a little bit more sense, because I would imagine there's so many moving parts. What happens the 7 days right before? Or like, what does that 7 days out even look like? Like, how many meetings are you having with volunteers? Are you talking to security? We talked about that before our talk. So I would love to get a sense of like what's going on those 7 days before this is live.
If everything's going well, it's quiet. It's quiet in the office. We make a great effort to get the information people need logistically out to the exhibitors. So we're counting, we send out emails and we check and see who's picked up their confirmations. We're looking to see who hasn't paid. We're going to collect money from the day of the event. And we're confirming volunteers. We have the volunteer training is the Saturday before and the Friday night before. So we're printing out a lot of things related to the volunteers. We're sorting and folding t-shirts. We have the volunteer organic, and this year we had a mix of hemp organic because cannabis is now legal, and we have a whole cannabis area. Because like other industries, it's over-regulated in some ways and under-regulated in some ways. So that's been a learning curve as well. We've got various people, just calling for basic questions like when is it and where is it. But mostly, so much stuff is available online that. As I said, if everything's going well, it's quiet. And we're just folding shirts and renting trucks. So we're starting to load signs, printing signs. That's the last thing that happens. We're building the 6 foot by 8 foot murals. We got a little bit ahead of that this week. We did it the weekend before. So a lot of logistics stuff. They're setting up the booths at Earth Day the couple days before. They start setting up some of the temporary booths that we bring in that aren't in rights of way for the public a couple days before at Balboa Park.
This question is about the yard waste recycling.
About what?
About the yard waste, the green bin.
Yard waste?
Yeah.
So I am the only one on my street who has a green bin.
Uh-huh.
And if I walk around the neighborhood on the waste day, it's probably like out of 200 homes, 5 or 6 green bins out there. I don't know if there's any education effort going around that tells the consumers, hey, the green waste pickup is there. I talked to one of my neighbors. He says he doesn't have a green bin. He has to go buy one, and he's not inclined to do that. I bought mine.
That's funny because my neighbor across, I live on a street where the green bin, I'm in a census tract line, and they get green bins across the street, but not where I am. So my neighbor across the street has gotten a green bin for me, and I wheel it across the street every week. But he told me that if you have an address, you can get 2 free ones if your address is served by the city. And it's like $75 to get an extra one. So I'm not sure that's true if you already had to pay for your one.
I bought mine from Home Depot.
Yeah. Well, yeah. See, that's the difference. I think any address can get 2 free green bins if they're served by the city. That's just what I heard recently. But if they have a garden, they have to pick it up anyway. So. This is where neighbor-to-neighbor education happens. It's like I probably wouldn't know, and I wouldn't have a green bin if Casey across the street, I hadn't seen it out there, and I said, oh, I want one of those, because I know that I can. The thing in the city, if you have a green bin or a black bin, if you can roll it to a city right away where they pick it up, they'll pick it up. They're required to pick it up. But if you can't roll it to that right away and you can't get a container, they won't pick it up. Then you have to have a private hauler. But it's sharing the importance of it, because it really is a great system, because they take lumber and plant matter, they'll take whole fruit, anything that comes out of a garden can go in that green bin, and it goes out to windrows out of there, and they actually turn it into mulch and compost. And if you live in the city, you can go pick up bins of free mulch and compost sorted like soil, from the really rough stuff to the really fine stuff. You just have to have your own bin to load it in and take it away. I think you just have to educate them. The city normally does one annual mailing a year to every address that gets green or blue or black pickup, and that's their one budget item they have to tell people. So it really just has to be, getting people to know that they can do that and that they want to do that. That's back to, okay, why aren't you doing it? And then how can I take this barrier away? If I bring you a bin, will you use it? That's kind of the level we're at.
Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. Before we kind of wrap up, are there any parting thoughts or comments or anything that you want to share with us?
Yes, you can visit the virtual Earth Fair online at earthdayweb.org, and we open for volunteer registration around January 1. And corporate sponsorship is important. Did you want to quote? Oh, I want to read that quote. Yes. Okay, so part of the context and the ethos of Earth Day is we organize to train our volunteers to leave Balboa Park cleaner than when they found it. But overall, we want people to leave the world cleaner than they found it. And this is how we end our volunteer trainings, with a quote from George Bernard Shaw from Man and Superman. "This is the true joy in life, being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one, being a force of nature instead of a feverish, selfing little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it is my privilege to do for it what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I have got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations." Thank you.
Thank you.